Welcome to Next Level Play Therapy, a weekly podcast dedicated to supporting the next generation of child and adolescent therapists to provide exceptional play therapy services. We'll explore all things play therapy to elevate your work with children and adolescents using the therapeutic powers of play. I'll discuss practical tips and ideas so you can provide a transformative experience for your young clients and make a real difference in their lives. So get ready to take your play therapy skills to the next level and make a lasting impact in the lives of children, adolescents, and families. Hey there. Welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy. Today, I want to talk about the role of parents in the play therapy process and whether or not you're going to make the long-term positive outcomes using play therapy if you're not really integrating parents in the play therapy process. So my question is, I think that we all need to consider, are considering. If you haven't thought about it, maybe this would be a good thing to start thinking and considering, is what's the best way to make the biggest and the most long-term positive outcomes using play therapy? Because the way that I look at it is, we get into play therapy, we get into mental health because we want to help. We want to help our clients. If you're a play therapist or you're a child and adolescent therapist, then you get into the mental health field because you want to help people. That's easier said than done sometimes, right? We get into the muck of it, I say, with our clients. We get in there that if we've built that trust with them, which is always the goal. If we've built that trust, it's a bridge for them to open the door to let us into their lives in a deep way, right? They trust us to let us in to see what's really going on, to see all the good, the bad, and the ugly, excuse me, so to speak. So that's the goal, right? To when they allow us to get in there and see, then we've built that place of trust, which requires some vulnerability on their part. If we're getting in there and we're really getting a sense of what's going on, then what's the most effective way to help our clients get the positive outcomes that they really want? The reasons that they're coming to counseling is to get better. You're the expert. Whether or not you feel like the expert, you are the expert because you have more training, knowledge, and experience, usually, unless you're working with parents who are therapists, then they're coming to you for help. So what's the best way to get those outcomes for children and adolescents? And if that's the question that you're asking yourself, then it'll be important to consider what's the role of parents and who is the therapeutic agent of change in the play therapy process when you're working with children and adolescents. If you're a child and adolescent therapist, who's the therapeutic agent of change? Is it the therapist or is it the parents? And I think you can make the case that it can be both, because as therapists, we're trained to develop that therapeutic rapport. We're trained to use a theoretical model to help our clients through each stage of the change process. The thing is, if you really, really want to get the long-term positive outcomes, then it'll be critical for you to answer the question of, are parents the therapeutic agents of change for their children? And I would say yes. I think parents are the therapeutic agents of change for their children. I think our role as play therapists is to provide support for parents to help them become that therapeutic agent of change. So, in a way, we're kind of both support and therapeutic agent of change for parents as well as for children. And when we're acting in that role of therapeutic agent of change for parents, then we're helping them become that therapeutic agent of change for their children. Because if you've listened to any of my past episodes, then you'll know that I think our role as play therapists is really to help children develop that safe, secure attachment relationship with their parents and help their parents become that long-term support for their children. And I include siblings. I think we don't really talk about siblings enough and the role of siblings in the healing process. So I would include sibling relationships in there because parents and children are in the lives of your clients much longer than you are. They're hopefully that's the goal, right? Hopefully they're going to have these really strong relationships with siblings and parents for the rest of their lives. So part of that means we have to get in there with them in the good, the bad, and the ugly of things and help them facilitate those changes. Um, for parents to become the therapeutic agents of change for their children, then you really need to identify what is their role. What is the role of parents in the play therapy process? If you're a child and adolescent therapist, and you're working with children or you're working with adolescents, what's the role of parents and how do you figure that out? So that's what I want to talk about today. If you're watching me live, I am streaming live into Instagram. I also am streaming live into LinkedIn and YouTube. The replay of this will be posted in my Facebook group because I can't live stream directly in there anymore using StreamYard. But I'd love to know who's here. If you're watching the live episode, post your name in the comments, what population you work with, where you work, how do you integrate parents in the play therapy change process. So that is what we're going to discuss today. If you're watching on the replay, I would still love to know who's watching, what population you work with, where you're working. So go ahead and post in the comments. If you're listening on the podcast, I would love to hear from you. So feel free to comment, feel free to leave a review. It's always helpful to get reviews. So I would love your feedback in a review if you're finding this helpful, what's helpful. And if you find the information useful, please feel free to share this with your colleagues, share it on your social media. And let's get started with our conversation for the day. So first and foremost, we are talking about really that idea, or the question is, can children heal in play therapy without the involvement of parents? I would say most child and adolescent therapists, most play therapists would say, no, we need parents in there. But what I've noticed is that there's not necessarily any understanding of what that's going to look like. How are you going to involve parents in the play therapy process? Which brings us to my first point to discuss today, which is in order to figure out how you're going to help your clients, and in order to figure out what is the role of parents in the play therapy process, you really first need to understand what the problem is and why is it happening. Because in order to answer the question of how can I help my clients, You have to first figure out what the problem is and why the problem is happening, which is also known as some good case conceptualization. So, if you're interested in learning more about case conceptualization, I have talked about that a lot in previous episodes. So, on Instagram, you could probably kind of go to my grid and go back and watch, find some of those older episodes. It's probably easiest to find, though, on my YouTube channel, Cathi Spooner Renewing Hearts Training. If you go to the live tab on YouTube, you can find all the replays. They are all there. So, first and foremost, what is the role of parents and how do you figure that out? Well, your theory model is going to influence how you make sense of what the problem is and how you make sense of what's contributing to the problem and the patterns that are sustaining it. So, this also, I would say, this also includes looking at those relationship patterns with family members. So, parents and siblings, if you have a household where maybe extended family are actively involved in the life of the child, then it's probably a good idea to look at those relationship patterns, look at the relationship patterns between parents and the other family members and how those dynamics work. That's really using more of the family systems lens to conceptualize the child in context of their larger family system. And when you think about it, in order to make really good, deep impact, you really need to consider the child in context of their system, child in context of family, child in context of school. What's going on at school? How are those dynamics at school? When the child gets to be a little bit older, maybe kind of those early adolescent years, late adolescence, what are the role of friendships? How are they navigating all of these social context? So you really want to look at child in context of their system, and there's a lot of systems to look at. I would say fundamentally and most importantly, I would want to see what's going on in their family system. If we're using that neuroscience and attachment lens, then we're conceptualizing those attachment relationships and their importance in identity formation and self-concept and learning resiliency, learning how to navigate the challenges of life. So those attachment relationships play a critical role, and looking at the child within the context of those is really, really important. So when we conceptualize what's going on with our clients and what's causing their distress, you really want to look at child in context of family. And children need their parents to help them regulate emotions. They need their parents to learn how to navigate the different challenges in life. They need that support. And so helping parents to be that support for their children, to me, is a gift that keeps on giving. It gives generationally because those patterns get passed on through the generation. If you're working with family systems and that have generational patterns of trauma, attachment wounds, addiction, poverty, being able to provide that support to parents to change generational relationship patterns is huge. And if you can support parents that way, then they can then make changes for their child and break some of those patterns, which is huge. And they can't do that alone. We can't do those things alone. We all need help. Sometimes life gets rough, for all of us. We always say in the mental health field, we do self-care. Well, I think that means we have those strong relationships in our lives that help us navigate those bumps and get back up and dust ourselves off and keep going. Well, children need that. That's their family. And when we're looking at how to help children and how to make that deep and lasting impact, then I think we need to consider the role of parents and the role of family in that change process. The problem is a lot of our training is mostly and I would say this even for adult training, especially the kind of if you're using more of an adult individual counseling model with children or adolescents, I would say where you're kind of missing out on thinking systemically and how to facilitate those changes systemically for your child or adolescent clients. So that brings us to my next point, which is who is the therapeutic agent of change for children? Children spend the vast majority of their time with their families. They need parents to create that foundation of safety and secure attachments with their children, with their family, with their children. Children learn how to adjust to the needs of others in families. They learn how to work through conflict. They learn how to share. They learn how to help each other out. They learn. I always used to say, I mean, I've said this for years. I've been in the mental health field over 30 years now. I've always said, like, your family is your learning laboratory for life. You learn how to, if you're a kid, you learn how to deal with authority, adults, those in authority over you. You learn how to deal with peers through your sibling relationships. You learn how to navigate that life isn't always about you. And sometimes it gets to be about you. How do I get my needs met in when it's not always about me and I have to adjust sometimes to accommodate others? How do we do that? Well, you do that in your family. And we know from research that all of these early experiences influence our beliefs about others, our beliefs about ourselves, and our beliefs about how relationship works. John Bowlby called these our internal working models. I would say, Daniel Siegel did a lot of work in that whole concept of interpersonal neurobiology, where we influence each other mind to mind, that even physiologically we influence one another. And that's one of the things I've been reading through The Brain Wise Therapist by Bonnie Badenoch. I hope I pronounced her name right. Anyway, she published, this is an oldie but a goodie. And to me, it's just like, this was just published like a couple years ago, but it was back in 2008. Really, really good book. Daniel Siegel published his book, Mindsight, with his model of how to help. It's kind of a theoretical model that he uses with his clients and proposed even for parents and teaching kids how to use Mindsight. It's really about understanding that we resonate physiologically and we influence each other on a neurobiological level. And that's what's happening in families. They're influencing each other. I always used to say, and there's this, I hope this is going to make sense, but so I would say families have characteristics based upon the individuals and the patterns that are passed along. So, you could say, oh, the Jones family down the street, and you get a sense of the character and the ways of being in the Jones family. Or maybe we have also the Smith family on the block, and the Smith family have these other characteristics, right? So you think about the parents and the kids and how they interact. We have those because we influence each other. We form our values, we form our beliefs through those early relationships. And so to me, conceptualizing who are the therapeutic agents of change for the child means that I'm taking into consideration all of these things. And as part of my case conceptualization, how am I assessing the strengths and the areas of need in these family systems? And for my child, for my client coming in who's a child, how am I conceptualizing all of this as influencing what's going on? So for me, that's why you make sure you do a really good, thorough case psychosocial assessment at that very first session to get you started. Otherwise, you will not really be gathering enough information to even begin to formulate even a fraction of understanding what the system is like and what's going on in the system. And that's, so to me, that's the importance of doing that psychosocial assessment at the very beginning, because that's also going to help you figure out who is the therapeutic agent of change and what is going to be the role of parents in the play therapy process, which is going to be influenced by your theory model. For example, child-centered play therapy is going to conceptualize just the child and what's going on with the child. And parents are never going to be in the session. If parents are in the session, it is not child-centered play therapy. Parents have a role. You meet with parents in kind of co-parenting or not co-parenting, but those, oh, my brain is not working. Those sessions just where you're meeting with parents so you can do kind of coaching, those parent coaching sessions, or back in the day, we would call them parent guidance, where you're kind of just meeting with the parents and working on those parenting skills. Other theory models, you can include parents in the play therapy process. There are some theory models, it's just one parent and one child. So that would be like theraplay or filial. They're just going to be one child and one parent, which is good. I think those are really good models. That the limitation is you don't get a sense of all the relationship dynamics. You don't get a sense of how parents are navigating all of the different needs in the family system, especially if there's, you have, sometimes siblings, you have family systems where siblings may have a pretty significant developmental delay, or maybe there's been a pretty significant health problem with one of the siblings, and how are parents navigating all of those challenges? How are the siblings managing these dynamics within the family system? If your client is the sibling, then how are the siblings getting their needs met in a family that's probably pretty overwhelmed a lot of the time anyway, if they haven't figured out how to navigate these and gotten some really good supports in place to help out with some of the things that are going on. So if you're considering who is the therapeutic agent of change, it'll be important to identify the role of parents and look at those sibling relationships and how parents are the therapeutic agent of change for your client as well as for the other siblings. How is that being managed? How are those relationships being managed? So I always think one of the most effective ways that play therapists and child and adolescent therapists can be a support to their client is to be that therapeutic agent of change for parents, which means you have to build that trust relationship with them where they will trust that you're not judging them, you're not thinking they're a horrible parent, you're not thinking everything is all their fault. And parenting is hard. We know that. As if if you have kids, parenting is hard, and getting some support is always nice, right? Um, so when we can be that therapeutic agent of change, that therapeutic support for parents, then they can turn around and use that support they've received and learn some skills and learn some strategies. They can use that with their child. So the third point that I wanted to talk about today really is, okay, so we now understand conceptualizing the role of parents in the play therapy process means I need to go back to my case conceptualization to understand what's going on and why is it happening. And I need to use a theoretical model to help me understand what that problem is and what the patterns are, because your case conceptualization is going to influence how you understand what the problem is and why is the problem happening. And then when we do that, then we can better identify, okay, so who is the therapeutic agent of change here? And how can I engage parents in a way that's going to have some really deep impact for clients? And what is that going to look like? Because it's going to be based on the model that I'm using. So how does all of that influence treatment planning? So when you're including parents or even siblings in play therapy, then you need to use a framework, which is going to be based on your theory model. So having a framework that's grounded in a theory to guide your clinical decision making and understand how you're going and kind of define how are you going to include parents. What's the role of parents? Like, for example, I developed a model. I call it attachment focused family play therapy. And one of the reasons I did that, one, systemically, I would say foundationally, one of my theory models is family systems. That was like 30 plus years ago. I grabbed onto that one, and I would say I think systemically with children. But over the years, I've also come to learn about attachment theory and neuroscience and interpersonal neurobiology. And when you're working with children, they can't be their therapeutic agent of change. They can't facilitate the change. They need parents to be involved to do that. And so, but I'm also a firm believer in sibling relationships and kind of looking at those dynamics. And so when I was considering how am I going to do play therapy? How can I make the most impact for children? I realized I needed a model that had enough flexibility and looked at the child in context systemically, but I also am a huge fan of attachment theory and neurobiology. So I wanted something that kind of integrated family systems theory. I had a really amazing experience learning learning about Bowen family systems theory. This was way, way, way a few decades ago. When I was in graduate school, that was my field experience was in a family systems program that used Bowen family systems theory. So I really got to see the nuances of that model. And I still kind of think that way because I think systemically through the generations to look at the different generational patterns. So integrate that with play therapy and some of the other family systems models with attachment and neuroscience. And to me, that provides the theory model to understand each stage of the change process and what is that going to look like. What's the role of the therapist? What's the role of parents? What's the role of clients? What are we going to be working on in each stage of the change process? Which means what kind of interventions I'm going to need at the various stages, and that needs to be grounded on a framework, which is why I created the attachment-focused family play therapy model to be able to guide that decision making through the change process, and how am I going to integrate parents, and how am I going to help parents be that therapeutic agent of change by teaching them some attachment-based play therapy strategies that they can use and practice in those family play therapy sessions. So the other thing that you're thinking about when you're thinking about your treatment planning and what model you're going to use, you're also thinking about who's going to be involved in the sessions and how are they going to be involved in the sessions. What you don't want to do is just have parents in the session, but you don't really have a plan. You don't really know their role. They don't know their role. You're just kind of having them in there and you're kind of winging it and figuring out as you go along. That may work for a little while, but it's not going to really be effective throughout the change process because you don't really have that foundation where you've explained to parents what their role is, what they're going to be doing in the sessions, what you're going to be doing in the sessions, what you're going to be doing with the child in the sessions, and how is that going to help get the goals, those treatment goals accomplished, the things that parents want to be better by bringing their child to therapy. How they don't really know how all of this is going to help to accomplish that because you haven't really explained the model. You're just kind of winging it. Which the nice part is parents are involved. That part's good. Having parents involved is really important. Having a plan and having a framework for how you're doing that is critical in order to make those good changes, because otherwise it just creates confusion and kind of undermines your ability if you're not really using a framework that's grounded in theory. So that is it for today. Let me just do a quick recap. First, when you're conceptualizing the role of parents in the play therapy change process, and you're using a neuroscience and attachment lens, then you recognize children exist within family relationships, family systems. You're looking at their relationship with parents. They're looking at relationship patterns, values, traditions, all of those things that influence children, their beliefs about themselves, others, and relationships. So using your case conceptualization in order to figure out what to do, you first have to figure out what exactly is going on and why is it happening. And in order to do that, you really need to have it grounded in some kind of theory model. I like using neuroscience and attachment with the family systems lens because then that helps me conceptualize what the problem is and why is it happening. So that way, that then helps me figure out who's the therapeutic agent of change. So I'm using that neuroscience and attachment lens. And if I'm using that lens with some family systems theory thrown in there, then I'm recognizing the role of parents. What is the role of parents? I'm recognizing parents are the therapeutic agents of change for their children. I am, as a play therapist, I'm also kind of that therapeutic agent of change for the child and the parents. But if I focus on being that support for the parents, then I can help them accomplish the goals that they want to achieve for their child. And in that way, it's all in service of helping the child. So the therapeutic agent of change, if you're figuring out who is the therapeutic agent of change, you or the parents, that's going to be heavily influenced by your theory model. So, and the third thing is, how does all of this influence treatment planning? So once you conceptualize the role of parents in the change process for their children in play therapy, if you're using a neuroscience and attachment lens, then you're going to be able to figure out how to incorporate parents. I would say even if you're using, I would say most of the play therapy models, I look at most of the play therapy models and I think, oh, there's neuroscience and attachment right there in the theory model. Because some of the theory models, play therapy models, do integrate, they look at children in context, which I think is amazing. Like Adlerian play therapy, Gestalt play therapy, Theraplay, filial therapy, other child-parent relationship therapy. They look at child in context of family, some more specifically focused on just the attachment relationship between the child and the parent and not the whole system in and of itself. But I think you can use a neuroscience and attachment lens for all of those. And then that's going to, once you conceptualize the role of parents, because you also have looked at what is the problem and why is it happening, that's going to help you figure out how to incorporate parents. What are you going to do in your sessions? What are you going to say to parents? How are they going to be involved? Are siblings going to be involved? If that's the case, what's that going to look like? If children are from divorced parent homes or homes in which the parents were never married and they're not together anymore, how are you going to conceptualize that? Can you have both parents in the play therapy session at the same time? I typically don't. I mean, it would be the rare exception. I typically recommend you just do like family play therapy with one parent's home and who's in that home, and family play therapy with the other parent's home and who is going to be involved in those sessions. But that's going to be dependent on how you conceptualize the problem and what your theory model says is your way of going about implementing and facilitating that change process. So that is it for today. I did want to mention, if you're interested in learning about attachment-focused family play therapy, I do have a book. It is called, this book, it's Attachment-Focused Family Play Therapy, an Intervention for Children and Adolescents After Trauma. This one is specifically focused on working with children who have experienced trauma, children and adolescents, to use this attachment-focused family play therapy model. I use attachment-focused family play therapy. I use it all the time. So it's a good model to use regardless of the presenting issues. And so I also have a webinar coming up. It's going to be on Saturday. It's a live webinar on Saturday, September 14th. I'm going to walk you through kind of an grounding in the theoretical foundation of attachment and neuroscience, and systems, thinking systemically. So I'll kind of ground you in the theoretical framework. And then I'm going to walk you through each of the stages of the attachment-focused family play therapy model. I'm going to talk to you about what is the role of the play therapist, what is the role of parents, how do you choose interventions, what is going to be accomplished in each stage of the change process. We'll have group discussions, we'll have some activities. So if you are interested in learning about attachment-focused family play therapy, then you're going to want to pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com/courses. So Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training, pop over to the courses page. There's two options. If you're available for the live webinar, you can register for the live webinar training. If you're not available this Saturday on September 14th, then or maybe you're outside of the US and it's just not a convenient time for you, but you really want the training, then there's going to be a recorded version. You have to register for that one separately. And that's because of the way that continuing education hours are applied. They have to be two different registrations. So if you're interested in the recorded version, you'll find that on the website, on the courses page. You're going to either have the live webinar registration, or if you want the training but you're not available at that time, you can register for the recorded version. And what I'm going to do is it'll be about a week afterwards. Once the live webinar training is over, we're going to kind of get the video fixed up and prepared. And then it'll drop into your account when it's ready. I'm anticipating that to be about a week before it'll be able to drop into your account. So if you're interested, pop over there and register. Registration is ending this week. So you probably want to sign up soon before it's not available anymore. So again, attachment-focused family play therapy. You can find that training on rhplaytherapytraining.com. Pop over to the courses page and then register. Also, I'm going to put links in the comments. So if you're watching on Instagram, you can go in my bio. There's a link there. Pop over to my website or look in the comments and you'll see a link in the comments. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Next Level Play Therapy. I hope you found the discussion valuable and gained new insights and ideas to support your work helping children, adolescents, and families heal. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps to improve and reach more people who can benefit from this information. Remember, play therapy is a powerful tool for healing and growth. Whether you're a new play therapist or experienced, I encourage you to continue your learning journey to unlock the potential of play in your own work and relationships. If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on social media and visit my website at Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training to stay updated on upcoming episodes, trainings, and resources. Thank you once again for listening to Next Level Play Therapy. Until next time, keep playing, learning, and growing.